is to do with inflation. And in particular, what you argue is that you must be consistent in your treatment of inflation. What we see is that there are two ways to do things, and you either have to work all in one way or all in the other way. You can't mix them. So what are the two ways that we have of thinking about things when there's inflation?
Nominal and real.
Nominal and real, exactly. So which is nominal? What does nominal do? If you're working in nominal terms, what are you using? You're using the actual dollars and the actual interest rates for your discount rates. So you don't make adjustments before you do the calculations. If we're working in real terms, what are we doing? We're adjusting for inflation. We're taking out the effects of the inflation. So in real terms, we're asking the question, what would have happened in the absence of inflation? So we take out the effects of inflation from real cash flows and from real discount rates. And the key thing is that we either work all in nominal terms or we work all in real terms. We mustn't mix them up at all. Now, if you do things right, you should get the same answer with both methods. So one natural question is, why do we have two methods to give the same answer? Now, a number of years ago, I was lucky enough to be in Brazil, and at that time, the inflation rate was 2% a day. So you would come for breakfast, you would get the money for lunch, but you wouldn't get it for dinner, because when you came back in the evening, it would be a different rate. Now, with 2% inflation a day, what's happening to prices in nominal terms? They're exploding. You've got thousands of percent over several months. So the question is, you lose track of how many zeros you should have.
No.
Now, you don't need these very high rates of inflation, even with quite reasonable rates of inflation, in the sense that they often occur in countries at various points. So something like 20%. Okay, so many European countries had 20% inflation back in the 70s. If you have 20% inflation and something costs $10,000 today, what's it going to cost 5 years from now? 20? 25,000? What? Well, it's difficult to know without doing the calculation. The actual answer is 25,000. 10 years from now, what's that 10,000 going to be equivalent to? 50? 60? What? Well, it turns out 62,000. So the problem is you can't keep track of the meaning of numbers and pick up mistakes easily. And so what people do in high inflation countries is work in real terms. In low inflation countries, they work in nominal terms. We need to be able to do both, because during your careers it's very likely you're going to have to use both methods. So, how do they work? Well, let's suppose we've got an example with an inflation rate of 40%. we've got a nominal discount rate of 50%. Let's look at the nominal calculations. Project is minus 1,000 today, then we've got 800, and then at date 2 we've got 1,700. So if we do the nominal calculation, we're just going to take those cash flows and discount them at what rate? That's the 50% that we're going to use. So it's going to be minus 1,000 plus 800 over 1.5 plus 1,700 over 1.5 squared. If you work that out, it's 289. That's a good project. We can go ahead and do it. How would the real calculation proceed? Well, what we have to do is to change the data into real terms. So the real cash flows are going to be found by taking the nominal cash flows, and then what we're going to do is divide by 1 plus the inflation rate for every year. So if we've got t years, we're going to take inflation out for each of those t years by dividing by 1 plus the inflation to the t. So if we look at our cash flows, our nominal at date 0 was minus 1,000. What's the real equivalent at date 0? It's 1,000, the same, because no inflation's occurred yet, so real and nominal are the same. Cash flow at date 1 is 800, and then the real is going to be 800 divided by 1.4, reflecting the inflation rate of 40%. If you work that out, it's 571.4. Cash flow is 1,700 at date 2, so we've got 1,700 over 1.4 squared, divided by 1 plus inflation rate for 2 years. That's 867.33. Sorry, 0.3. So we want to find the real discount rate. We take 1 plus the real discount rate and find it by having 1 plus the nominal discount rate, and we divide by 1 plus the inflation rate to take out the effects of inflation. In our example, it's going to be 1.5 divided by 1.4, which is 1.0714. Now, macroeconomists often say, okay, well, you take the nominal rate, subtract the inflation rate to get the real rate. If you do that here, what's the answer you get? It's 10%. It's not the right answer, it's just an approximation. So you can't just subtract the inflation rate from the nominal rate to get the real. It only works for low numbers. So you need to do it by dividing by 1 plus the inflation rate. So the real discount rate is 7.14%. So now we can do our NPV, and that's going to be minus 1,000 plus 571.4. 1.074 over 1.0714 plus 867.3 divided by 1.0714 squared. If you work it out, it's 289. So as we expected, they're the same. If you get different answers, you did something wrong. If you're working in real terms, you have to be careful of a number of things. If you're working in the US, is the tax code written in real or nominal terms? Nominal terms. So for example, to get a depreciation deduction, what the tax code says is you take the nominal purchase price, you subtract the nominal salvage value, and you divide by the number of years. That gives you a constant nominal amount each year. What's happening to that in real terms? Got a constant nominal amount. In real terms, it's doing what? Well, the first year you're going to divide by what to turn it into real? 1 plus the inflation. And then the second year you're going to divide by 1 plus the inflation squared. So what's happening in real terms? It's decreasing as inflation eats away the purchasing power of the constant nominal amount. So you've got to do it that way. You can't just take the real purchase price, subtract the real salvage value, and divide by the number of years, because then you're getting a constant real amount, and that's obviously different than our declining amount with the nominal calculation. The one that's correct is the nominal because the tax code's written in nominal terms. So there are a number of subtleties like that when we come to do problems, as you'll see. So be careful about how the tax code is written.